when it comes to technology, I'm a boomer. And one of the main reasons is that when I was at the University of Medicine, I had my nose in books most of the time. I barely had any social life, so let alone have the time in order to catch up with all the new technological trends. So I didn't even know about 4K and whatnot until I went into a store and saw an actual Ultra HD TV for the first time. And it just blew me away. I mean, the difference between 180p and 4K was just massive. I couldn't believe that a television can see images this clearly. And it was also quite cheap because the moment I found out about it, the technology was already years into development. So I saved money and bought a 4K TV, and after a while you kind of get used to the clarity and the image, so it doesn't have that wow factor anymore. And now, of course, most streaming services, they offer 4K material, and you can play even video games with 4K if you have a new graphics card. I think you can even play with a 180 Ti. You can also play in 4K. But now the new thing is 8K. And I was doing some research for a video to talk about how people are just having more money during the pandemic because they don't go out anymore, they don't go to restaurants, they save a lot of money. And they're spending it on things that, in my opinion, they shouldn't. You know, like 8K televisions. Because, like, at the end of the day, what do you do with an 8K television? Like, there is no content for it. You can just buy a cheaper version of the 4K that's probably even better because it has better contrast, better colors. So why do people invest in 8K? And I genuinely thought at first that it must be a mind-blowing experience. Like, it must be the same thing like going from 180p all the way to 4K. Because there's no way of actually knowing how 8K looks like unless you actually have an 8K capable television or monitor. And yesterday I finally got to see an 8K television by going to a store, and they had one on display. Now, I want to say that I wasn't impressed. I mean, especially when you have the store and you get to see the 8K television surrounded by other 4Ks. And the other 4Ks, they were also expensive, right? It was like the premium part of the store. But you could notice that the 8K was like a little bit better when it came to the imagery that it showed. Like it had a little bit more clarity. If you go next to it, so if you approach it, you get to see a clearer image, which I honestly think is what it's going to be mostly used for, gaming. Because when you game, you have to sit closer, so you don't notice any of the imperfections that 4K sometimes has. But if you're actually using a television and you're sitting in the sofa and you're looking at it, it better be a big-ass screen to even be remotely worth it, or for the people around you to even notice that it's 8K. So I genuinely do not recommend it, to be honest. I mean, besides the fact that you don't have content, even if you would have, let's say, some streaming service that would push for 8K things, you would need the best internet in the world in order to be able to cope. Because you're talking about downloading massive gigabytes of data just to see a 40-minute TV show. So I was really disappointed. Now, a lot of people are going to make the discussion. It's like, yeah, but the human eye, the brain can perceive, and it's like yeah, the same conversation that people used to have between 30 and 60 FPS. They would say, well, yeah, but the human eye can only perceive so many frames, and it's like, yeah, but when the technology actually comes around and people actually experiment with it, they realize that for gaming, 60 FPS is a lot better because when you're playing a shooter, you get more frames, so more opportunity in order to shoot your target and whatnot. Like, now the conversation is over. But at the time, I remember like gaming companies just saying, no, we're not going to release our game in 60 FPS. We're going to limit it at 30. Simply because the human eye cannot perceive it. Like I think it's the same with 4K and 8K. Like, maybe we're going to see that it has some advantages, especially when you're playing video games. And right now you even have like the technology, if you have the money, you can theoretically play a game in 8K. Like you can probably buy an 8K television, and with one of the new graphics cards, the 390, right? Maybe you can buy two of those and make a bridge, and you can play some 8K. But I just like don't see it. I don't really think it's that big of an idea. Now, here's another interesting fact. Okay, now I wear glasses. I got astigmatism, and if I took my glasses off, I couldn't see the difference between 4K and 8K. It was all the same. So when I put my glasses on, then I could notice the difference, which was very small, right? And it was just in the details. And this is another important aspect, right? So if you're a person that doesn't have perfect eyesight, and by the way, like my condition is not that bad. I mean, I can function just fine daily without having glasses. So if you don't have like perfect 20/20 vision, you might not even be able to tell the difference between 4K and 8K, even at close range. So, you know, it's just like a luxury item. It's like a fine wine, I suppose, for people that are really passionate about electronics. And there seem to be a lot of these people nowadays because, again, a lot of these TVs were sold out after Black Friday. And they weren't on a discount or anything. It's just like people saved a lot of money. And instead of buying on something that they can invest, especially because there's an economic crisis coming, they're buying these luxury items that aren't usable at the moment. There's no way to use them. I understand that even if you hook them up to the computer, like someone explained it to me, there's like a bottleneck that comes from the graphics card all the way to the monitor. Well, in this case, the TV. And again, like you have to use a TV to play it because I don't even think there are 8K gaming monitors available. And it's ridiculous because in 1 or 2 years, these things are going to be as cheap as 4K televisions. So, you know, my advice to you, if you want to buy a TV this Christmas or you want to buy a monitor this Christmas, there are more important things than 8K. Like, you should focus on the contrast. You should focus on the color palette. You know, make sure they have HDR10. And just like, then you can focus on the size. Right, like it's more important to have, like it's a lot better to have a bigger 4K TV with good contrast and good colors and good lighting than to have like a small 8K one without these things, and which costs 3 times or 4 times more than the previous one. So yeah, I mean that's my advice. I made the video because I was like really curious how 8K looks like. Now I guess I'm curious how 16K looks like. Maybe there's going to be a massive difference between 16K and 4K. Who knows? Let me know what you think though, and I'll see you guys in the comment section.